Hello out there, Happy New Year. It's Julie. Today I am going to be doing a video response to Honey Lou and her unicorn decks of 2023. I got a bunch of decks this year that have been on my wish list for a very long time. So I want to share those with you. I'm very excited to share those with you. And before I begin, this deck is not a unicorn deck, but it's a deck I didn't know I need, but now that I have it, I know I need it. It is Le Tarot de Marseille Waite by Emmanuelle Iger and Alice Laverty. I think that's how you say it. I apologize if I am not doing justice to your names, but it is the book's in French and English. It is a deck that has all the majors in Marseille style, but all the minors are Waite Smith. And I kind of thought that was really interesting. And I'm excited to try this and see how it affects my readings. Because I read the Marseille majors a little bit more practically, a little bit more, I don't want to say materially, but like in a more grounded way than I do, say, the Waite Smith or a couple of times I've dipped my toes into the Thoth deck. So I'm really excited to try this out. So I thought I would share it with you because if anybody else is interested, I got this on the French Amazon website because I was looking for a tarot, an oracle deck, a specific oracle deck, and you can only get it through the French Amazon. It's the only place I could find it, at least. So anyway, thought I'd share that with you. But now on to the unicorn decks. And my first unicorn deck is a deck I had been wanting for a while. I did get the golden, I do have the golden rider Waite Smith, and this is literally just a Waite Smith deck that has been painted on top of. And I actually like the way it looks. It makes it feel a little bit fresher. It makes the images a little bit more, I don't want to say interesting, but unique, a little different. And I really like it. But the golden rider is really just the Rider Waite Smith painted over. I have been really wanting the J.K. Waite deck, and I believe that's what this is called. It's by Tairuku Shobo, and it's all in Japanese, so I can't tell you very much about it. The book also entirely in Japanese, which I cannot read. And in Japan, I believe Japanese is read from right to left. I think it's similar to Hebrew, if I recall correctly, because this book is read this way. So I found that to be really interesting because in the cards, I was finding that some of the cards are facing the opposite direction that they would face in the Waite Smith deck, the original Waite Smith deck. So this is a really fun, colorful version of the Rider Waite Smith. And as you can see, the cards are pointing in a different direction. And I'm wondering if that is because Japanese is read from right to left. So, except the court cards, he's still facing the normal way that he would be facing. But as you can see, the Ten of Wands is facing the opposite direction. Death is facing the opposite direction. And I find that interesting because I'm thinking about it now and I'm like, how is this going to affect my readings? The Tower and the Sun are still in a similar place, except it almost feels like death is something you have to get through in order to get to the next phase. So you're almost forced to make things like have this ending happen in order to get to where you need to go, as opposed to him coming in from the other way. Does that make sense? I don't know. It made sense in my head. Six of Wands is going the other way, but the Empress is facing the normal way. So if anybody has any idea as to why some of the cards are reversed and some aren't, I would be interested to hear, because I am quite curious about it. And I do think partially it has to do with the way that the language is read. But I just think it's a beautiful, fun, colorful deck. And again, this is why I like reading with other decks, because the way others interpret the cards or view the cards gives my encyclopedia in my brain of tarot and the Rider-Waite-Smith decks. It just gives it more depth and more information and more to pull from when I do readings for myself or others. So this is a really fun deck that I've been after for a long time, and I was finally able to find a copy that was in really good shape. So this is the JK Waite. Okay, so this deck is my second copy of this deck, but this is the first edition. I have the second edition, and I adore the artwork on this deck, but I really wanted this deck because I wanted the original Hierophant. And it is the first edition of the Marielle. And I wanted the Hierophant as it was originally intended. It is a very evocative card, and it can make some people very uncomfortable. But you know, the image of the Hierophant in this deck is art doing what art does best. It speaks loudly without having to utter a single word. So, and I think that goes for a lot of the art and the images in this deck. It's just beautiful. I find it to be very powerful. It's uncomfortable, you know, and I think it's important for us to be taken out of our comfort zones. Look at that High Priestess. It's just so beautiful. And what's interesting here is in this, usually we see the Empress is pregnant, but here it feels more like the High Priestess is pregnant. And that kind of makes sense because she's about to give birth to something, right? Here's the original Hierophant. And that makes some people very uncomfortable, but I find it to be really powerful, and it speaks so loudly, but it's not in the newer editions because of how uncomfortable it made some people, apparently. But yeah, this deck is something. And this is the deck that I am working with for the month of January. So I did my first reading with it today because I was out of town yesterday, and I loved it. And I'm really, really excited to work more with it, learn more about it. This image feels very thothy for me for some reason. But yeah, this is the first edition Marielle. This has been on my list for a while. And again, I finally found a copy that was in a really nice condition. All right, the next deck is the Solara Occulto Meliosa. I think that's how you, or no, Meliora. Oh my gosh, the Solara Occulto. And I have been trying to find this deck for a long time. And the cost was either crazy high for the earlier editions, or it was just completely sold out for this edition. And there's a tarot page that I follow, and someone informed me that it was available on the artist's page, and I finally got it. And I may have bought the Crimson Asteria too, but I digress. I actually prefer this edition because it's borderless and the artwork is front and center. And it follows the Rider-Waite-Smith beautifully, but it is like the Rider-Waite-Smith in another world of fantastical folkloric creatures. And that's just what I adore about it. And I also like that on the cards, you can see here specifically, like the marker strokes. So it feels like this beautifully hand-drawn deck, which it is. But there's just, that just adds to its kind of like magic, if you will. I just love the artwork on it. There's something about it that sort of reminds me of the Black Violet Tarot. I have the Cherry Blossom edition of that. But I mean, look, he's so cute. He's kind of cuddly. And the artists, I just like the artist's vision of each card and how they interpreted it in their own art style. So yeah, I've been wanting this deck for so long. And actually, when I had, the artist is amazing. When the Crimson Hysteria came in, there was an issue with the deck, and they promptly sent me a new one, and I thought that was really cool because not a lot of people are always that responsive, but they were right on top of it. And it is a bit pricier, but it's just gorgeous. And the cards they're thick, they feel substantial, which I like. And I can't shuffle it the normal way I shuffle, but that's okay. It's sort of forcing me to come up with a new way of shuffling that's more that has more intention put into it, which may sound stupid, but I don't know. Anyway, you can see, I mean, this is I have big hands, and this is a massive deck. So I shuffle with more intention now rather than just, I think it's called riffle shuffling. I definitely shuffle differently. And also I don't want to destroy these cards because they're just gorgeous. So this is the Solara Occulto Meliora. Meliora. Can anybody pronounce that for me the way it's correctly supposed to be pronounced? Please, thank you. So I don't know much about this deck or the creator, but I have lusted after this deck for a very long time. And this is the R Black Tarot. This is, there's no booklet. It's just all the meanings of the cards are basically printed on these little cards. And I feel like this artist is definitely an illustrator of some sort, but it does feel like they have a real understanding of the tarot. I feel like a lot of new deck creators, they're creating decks just for the sake of creating a deck, and they may lack knowledge of tarot itself. And this creator feels like they actually understand tarot. I just think it's such a great deck. It's so clean. It's simple. It's super modern, but it speaks loudly. Love this Temperance card. And I love the Hangman in this deck as well. And the Six of Cups in this deck is really quite beautiful. But see, it's just so clean, so simple, but it speaks so loudly within its simplicity. And I know I've talked about this deck before in another video, but I could use this deck. I can use this deck for so many different types of readings. It's very contemplative to me. As I say contemplative, I pull up the Daughter of Wands. Like, look at this Six of Pentacles. I'm sorry, not the Six of Cups, the Six of Pentacles. It's a really interesting take on it, isn't it? This guy, we assume, has so much money, right? Because he's got the business suit, he's a businessman, but he's down on his luck. And this man here, who appears to live a very simple life with not much, is offering up what little he has to somebody who already has a lot because he's in need. Oh, that's so powerful. And here's the Hangman. Completely different way of thinking about this card. I don't know. I just think it's so beautiful. I did modify the deck. It had very pointy corners, so I did round off the corners because it wasn't very fun to shuffle and play with or use when I was using it. So I did round off the corners, and I think it looks better with the rounded corners. But this is the R Black Tarot. I believe there was only one run of this, and I think there's only 1,000. So I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I have not been able to find this deck. This has been a very elusive deck for me. So this is the R Black. So the Eclectic Tarot. Now this is a deck that I was drawn to, And I kind of waffled on it for a while. I went back and forth with it. Do I want it? Do I not want it? And I think what put me off initially is it is a pip deck. And for a little while, I was kind of not wanting to read with pips. But now that I've been studying Marseille, now that I'm about 2 years into my studying of tarot, I really love reading with pip cards. So I kind of came across this again. It kind of showed up in one of my feeds, and I was like, is it time to get it? I don't know. Is it time to get it? And I did. And I love the cardstock. This is a Platonic Wayne deck. And the cardstock, they're like super thick. It's like cardboard almost. And I kind of like that. They feel substantial in the hand. But there's just something about this deck that I really like, that I'm really drawn to. I love here that King of Cups has fire in his cup. It feels kind of electric to me, right? It's eclectic, but it feels electric. And I think it's just because of how they sort of outline some of the images. This death card is really quite beautiful. I mean, can you hear that cardstock? It's like, there's like no bending these cards. I mean, you can bend them, obviously, but if you bend them, I feel like it's going to crack. So I do think you need to be careful with them. I don't have too much to say about it. I haven't really worked with it yet. This just came in a couple days ago when I was out of town. So I'm really excited to be able to play with it a little bit. And this is a deck I do feel I'm going to have to study a little bit. There are some symbols on it that I am not sure of yet, like why some of the fives have a downward pentagram, some of them have an upright pentagram. I like this magician. He feels definitely more aligned with a Marseille deck. This tower card is beautiful. I really find this Hierophant interesting, and this is another reason why I want to study it. If here, like in the Rider-Waite-Smith Hierophant, if we look at it, the two people at the bottom almost look like they're looking up at the Pope, right, or at the Hierophant, whereas here they seem more focused on these keys, and this one is illuminated by this candle. So I would love to kind of figure out my interpretation of this version of the Hierophant, because it feels very different from the Rider-Waite-Smith, even though visually things are the same. There's slight adjustments within this that kind of shift the meaning for me. I also remember there being a reason why the alligator or the crocodile is in some of the Fool cards, and I need to go back and revisit that too. So yeah, this is the Eclectic Tarot. Okay, so this deck has been at the top of my list for a very, very long time. You can get this print on demand, but I wanted the original, and I've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and I always check eBay. I always check all my sites that I usually go to, and I finally found this one listed for sale. It has been elusive and very hard to get, and this is not at all my typical style of deck that I am drawn to. It's a bit pastel-y and soft, where I tend to be drawn to contrast and really saturated colors. So I found it really interesting that I felt compelled to have this in my collection, because it's really, really not at all what I'm usually drawn to. But I think that is kind of why this deck called to me, that I need some softness to balance out that like hard contrastiness that I am that I'm drawn to, that exists in my life on a pretty consistent basis. And the deck feels watery and light, but it's not babying, if that makes any sense. And me being almost all fire and air in my chart, it feels like this deck is my counterbalance. This deck asks me to feel and not think so much. And yeah, I just think that this deck balances me out in some way. And while there's a lot of decks that are soft and watery and pastel-y, this is the one that really, really called to me and appealed to me. And anytime that I've used it, the few times that I've used it, I just get really solid readings that I continue to think about throughout the day. Look at that Hierophant. Drastically different from the Hierophants that we've looked at today. But there's just a gentleness. And I think it's important to have one of those decks that is your counterbalance, that does allow you to turn off the thinking mind or turn on the thinking mind if you're naturally a watery, fluid kind of person. If any of you have balance decks out there, like what deck, I would love to know what your balance deck is. What is the deck that is like the counterbalance to who you feel you are naturally? I'm always curious. But yeah, this is it for me. So this is the Liminal Tarot. All right, I know I've talked about this one before, because I just did a couple of readings with this, but this is the Anna Kay. I just finished working with this in the month of December. And can anybody explain to me, I believe this is a first edition and the cards are smaller. Are the newer editions of this bigger cards? I'd be curious because I would love to see these in a bigger version as well as this smaller version. But anyway, this is 100% a desk deck for me. This is going to always be on my deck because it reads so easily. And if I just need a quick reading, like this it says what it needs to says quickly and concisely. This is a very good deck to read for yourself, if you're reading for others. Each image visually tells a story. And when the cards are combined, the deck like narrates the reading to you. And I call it my storybook deck because of that. And it has this real fairy tale quality to it. So this is like a storybook deck because it really does. The cards, when you place them together, it narrates a story. And it's really quite impressive. I have not found another deck that really does it the way that this deck does it. There might be some out there. If you know of any, let me know. I'd be curious to check it out. Not that I need any more decks, but you know, I'd have to really be drawn to it. But I'm sure, I know this is a very popular deck. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this deck over and over and over again, but this was definitely a unicorn deck for me because I had wanted it for a long time. And again, when I don't mind buying used decks, but I prefer them to be in like good condition because I use my cards a lot. So if they are already not in the best condition or quality when I get them, I know they're going to deteriorate rather quickly. So I always try to get the cleanest version of, out of print or used decks that I can. But this deck is phenomenal, and it's one that I will recommend to everybody. And I know it's out of print, but I have been hearing that the artist does still sell the deck on their website. So if you're interested in it, you might want to check that out. So the last deck is the Shimmering Veil Tarot, and I've been reading tarot for about 5 years, but I've only really been studying tarot for the last 2. And when this came out, I had not connected as deeply to tarot as I connect to it now. And I thought that this deck was beautiful, but I just wasn't feeling it. And I kept stumbling across it. I kept stumbling across it and I kept getting drawn to it and I kept rejecting it because of just that lack of connectivity I was feeling to it. But I realized now I was not ready for this deck when I first came across it. And it's very, very minimal. It can be quite abstract. And without a good handle on the meaning of the cards, it may feel like a deck, that is just made for the sake of making a deck. But now that I know tarot on another level, this deck totally frees me to get in touch with my intuitions and with my intuition. And like I can 100% see how the card goes with its traditional meaning, but it invites you to go deeper within yourself and to extract what may not always be so apparent. So I don't know if I will use this deck ever to read for others, but this is a deck that I keep at my desk at all times, because I reach for it a lot more than I ever thought I would. And there's just something really freeing about this deck for me. You know, I love my symbolism. I love my, you know, my symbols and cards that are like a storybook and that read loudly and clearly. But sometimes I need to turn my thinking mind off. And this deck really, really, really lets me connect to my intuition a lot deeper than many of the other decks that I have. So this is a very important deck for me to have on in my reach at all times. So yeah, the Shimmering Veil. And I know this has been out, I think, since 2020. But I really feel like I had to be in a place where I was ready to read with this. And I think for me, it meant understanding tarot on a deeper, more esoteric level, in order to really see where this deck is coming from. So anyway, that is the Shimmering Veil Tarot. And thank you for watching my video. I hope I didn't sound too all over the place. I haven't made a video in a while, so I feel like, you know, sometimes I just ramble and I sound dumb, but hopefully I don't sound too dumb when I'm making these videos. But I'm going to stop talking, and I hope you all have a wonderful day, a wonderful weekend, and I will catch you later. Cheers.